Imagine this, it's 1985, the cinema lights go down, and a song starts that doesn't just soundtrack a movie, it helps define a decade. That voice and that song belongs to our guest. He wrote and sang St Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion, an anthem that's outlived the film itself, and still gives people goosebumps. He's shared stages with rock royalty, Tina Turner, the Beach Boys, Toto, Journey, taking songs from the studio to arenas packed with people singing every word back at him. But behind the big hair, big choruses and a big crowds is a different story. A working class kid who turned melodies in his head into global hits, who's written the highs of number ones and the lows of the music industry, and who's still creating on his own terms decades later. Now he's not just a musician, he's also a filmmaker, and he's become deeply interested in Welsh culture, our people, our stories. On this episode of Inside the Maverick Mind, we're talking about what it really takes to write an anthem, survive the chaos of fame, and keep your creative fire burning. John Parr is our guest. Let's get inside his Maverick Mind. John, great to have you with us.
Yeah, great to see you.
Before the arenas and the film themes, what did life look like when you grew up, and when did music first feel like the way out?
I was born on the wrong side of the tracks, they reckon. A little mining town in Nottinghamshire. Nobody'd ever escape, really. Robin Hood is probably the nearest. I was born in my nana's house, little two up, three down. My mum, my dad, my auntie Kath, my uncle Brian, and their baby. So it was very cosy. Tin bath by the fire. So that was idyllic. That was all we knew. It was full of love. And then we moved to the shiny new council estate when I was 5. And I suppose it really began then, went to St Augustine's primary school. And I started putting plays on at school. They saw it in me and they would give me the school hall to put plays on at 6, 7, 8. So it began then, before music, really.
When did it stop being, I love music, and start being, I'm going to build a life around this? Even if that sounded crazy to people around you back then.
You know, being a kid of the 60s, the Beatles was it. And it pulled me away from the dramatic side, straight into music. I think it was an epiphany for everyone. The Beatles were just it. My town had a couple of clubs, British Legion, Miners' Welfare, and that was like the London Palladium. We started a school band, started playing. First gig for money, 6 guineas at the Miners' Welfare workshop in the school band. And then I got the bug, really got the bug, and practiced and dragging people along that didn't have the same work ethic, but kind of just pushing and pushing. And just looking at the top line, looking who's the competition, locally, internationally, globally. And you jump for each bar.
I've seen that work ethic that you have, incredible. But I think that doing it incrementally, just hitting what you've got right in front of you, rather than thinking, I want to be this, do what you've got in front of you. I think it's really wise words. A little bit of context from my side. The younger me spent a lot of time in bands, writing, recording, gigging, and even touring. I was up against 2 big things, a very religious family, and I found myself arguing, why does the devil have all the good music? You know, it's crazy. And that was part of my rebellion. And this notion that it wasn't a proper job. Did you get that kind of thinking to shut you down, your creative expression, or did the maverick behaviour just override that?
Mum and Dad were always supportive. My dad was the manager from 12 years old right up to being 19. But it was get a proper job. I failed my 11 plus, but I got a job at Bachelor's Foods, so Vesta. And I worked in every level of food production, from unloading the pea sacks to working in the laboratory. So I was working the clubs at the same time. And it was a great leveler because people would say, I saw you last night, you were crap. They'd love it, because you were trying to be different. Only in later life did my dad say to me, maybe it's time to get a proper job. But I was way down the road then. I was probably pushing 30 when he said that. Up until that point, he'd always been when I'm going to do it from me rather than if I'm going to do it. I was always certain. But when your dad says maybe it's time to get a proper job. And I was at my lowest ebb when he said it. In retrospect, I wonder if it was a G-up. I wonder if he really meant that. He's gone, so I can't ask.
Bless him. Well, thank you to both of them for being so supportive. That's a big the best beginning in life, you know.
Totally.
But sometimes when people say you can't do something, a Maverick says, "I'm just
Totally.
watch me,"
Yeah.
even if you're saying it quietly in your head.
Yeah.
Was there a moment you realised you didn't really think like most people around you, that you were wired a bit differently?
I knew it from a very early age, really early. I suppose even 5, 6 years old, I was an only child, and you want friends, it's not just your mum and dad, is it? And so I'd be the school mimic and the school comedian, just, trying to get attention. I knew it was different. And as my life progressed, that burn, I call it cursed with ambition. I think I was cursed with ambition, and it just built and built and built. And it was intolerable. I heard a great speech by Richard Burton. He's talking about Frank Sinatra. And he said, burnt to the bone, consumed by the flames of his own ambition.
Wow.
I thought, man, that's me, And I felt completely alone within it. It wasn't just felt different. I felt alone, painfully alone, like I was wired wrong, like I was wired different,
I was the youngest of six, always the performer, always the entertainer, so I relate to that. But I couldn't find the off switch either. Do you mean you are, I don't know what it is, it's just conditioned, to do something. Self-propelled, I guess, which is what you had to be. Who were the first people who backed that in you, the mentors or bandmates who give you permission to be that bit maverick? Who was around you saying, let's do this?
I said it was my father that would, they paid where they couldn't really afford for guitar lessons. They paid for guitar lessons. And he would, at that time, I didn't have quite the same work ethic. And he would look round the corner and say, you got another 10 minutes. So it was always a half an hour. And it was a pain to me, some of it, because those guitar lessons in the early days were Burt Weedon playing a day. So you had Bobby Shafto, When the Saints Come Marching In. So not really stuff that was energizing. But my father made me stick at it, that way. So he was the first. And then I think probably very late, probably 15. So I was already playing for money. I'd been playing for money for 3 years, but still at school. But the teachers would say, knuckle down, you're always looking out the window dreaming. And then we played the school dance, and they all came up to me at the end and said, forget everything we ever said. That's it. So that was the real endorsement that, these kind of peer pressure, deputy head, headmaster, saying, you've got potential, but, get a proper job.
I think the foundation of learning an instrument like that, although you have to go through the rudiments of music, it gives you a fantastic lexicon to write music later on, although you had to play When the Saints Come Marching In before it. Let's get into your Maverick mindset and the mechanics of what you do. St. Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion has become the anthem for a lot of people. When you were writing it, did it feel different, or did it just feel like another session at the time?
It came at a point where I was in a room with somebody that 5 years earlier, I was broke, no hope. My wife was paying the bills, and I was just sending cassettes out. But I'd be listening to Earth, Wind and Fire. I'd be listening to Chicago, Toto, all of whom were directed by David Foster, produced by David Foster. So I'd got this call. I was already on the road and I'd had a hit, but he called me. I was suddenly in a room with this person that I'd cried listening to those records, thinking, I'm never going to be there. So I got there. You can imagine, this is my dream. I'm in the room with just he and I in LA, the Lighthouse studio. And he went, great to meet you. I had a song called Naughty Naughty. I love it. But I'm exhausted. I don't want to write a song. I'm exhausted. And I said, please just give me 5 minutes, And he went, I'm burned, man. I'm like, he was doing his first ever score for a movie, but he was also doing 10 original tracks with 10 original artists. It was too much. And I talked him into going into the control room. Obviously, I'm in a room with a master, one of the probably top handful of people in the world. And we wrote a song in 5 minutes, and I went, wow, this is great. And he went, we can do better. And it changed. And then I wrote another one, and he went, we can do better. And the third was St. Elmo's. And it was just electric because he was playing all these incredible chords that anybody knows David Foster's music. It's like he's got 15 fingers. Not speed, just beauty. And we wrote the song really quickly. But I knew it was great, but couldn't come up with the words. Joel Schumacher, the director of the film, came down. He'd written the film. And I just couldn't empathise with the story. And then David showed me a video cassette, local news of a young boy who'd broken his back in a car accident, severed his spinal cord. And he said, I'm going to get in my wheelchair and wheel it around the world and raise money for spinal research. 25,000 miles. Called the Man in Motion tour. And the hairs on the back of my neck went up. I went back to the hotel that night and on hotel notepaper wrote what I thought this young person would achieve. And came in the next day and sang. David said, what is this? And I went, well, this is that video you showed me. But I tailored it so people would think that the pair of wheels was Demi Moore's Jeep and not the wheelchair. For once in his life, a man has his time. It's not when Emilio gets the girl, it's when Rick Hansen bursts through that winning tape. And it predicted what happened. He did wheel around the world, and we've raised now nearly 400 million for spinal research. And the song lives on. And I think it lives on because I realise, as you psychoanalyse yourself, when I sing it, I'm so over the top singing it because I'm the guy in the chair. I am him. And all my personal struggles that I'd got, in those 20 years to get there, it was the same struggle with the same barriers. And I think that's what St. Elmo's Fire is. So even people that don't know what it's about. And so David said, well, the film company are never going to swallow it, And I said, well, it's worse than that. I want to call it Man in Motion. How are you going to, and it was that quick that it was in the movie and done before anybody woke up to the fact that it was St. Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion. So that was if you like, that was the beginning of standing up to a giant and saying, well, I was just trying to persuade somebody that I was in awe of. Give me a shot.
But I do think you bottled that energy, that disappointment, and that, the whole graft of getting there, and it exploded into a song which, has lasted so much. You've written a lot of great songs, John. Why do you think that song in particular has lasted the way it has?
I think it's lightning in a bottle. But it's the only time in my life where I had the weight of the machine behind me fully, except the record label. Record label hated it, believe it or not. They wanted me to be a leather-clad rocker. And so they never promoted St. Elmo's at all. So when I was touring America with Tina, and I'd get off the plane, and when I'd been on the tours before, there was always the record guy there, take me all the radio stations. None of that with St. Elmo's Fire at all. They didn't like it. They didn't want me to do it. And I wanted to do it again, against the grain. And it was the power of Sony and the movie that launched it. And I can remember the people I'd had such a battle with my first record that went number one in America, but it was really in the trenches, really day to day, tears, blood, sweat and tears. And they just went, enjoy the ride. And when you've got that rocket launch of Sony and and the Brat Pack, that's what did it, I think. And then, like you say, long after the film faded, the song was in orbit and it kind of went off the radar for a bit, but then people got it. There's something about that song and the life of its own within it, I think, energizes people and gets them through many things. Having said that, I think I've got other songs that are its equal, but never had the machine, some of which were never released. So if I'm the biggest movie of the year, Three Men and a Baby, I wrote it with Carol Bayer Sager and Marvin Hamlish and David, but Atlantic wouldn't release it because they didn't want me doing. And it was the story of my life. A lot of those Hollywood soundtracks for huge movies were never released because the record company didn't want it. So my career's a strange one that way, that it looks like, you curse with that one hit wonder and yet there are 10, 12 Hollywood movies that could have, 6 of which had original songs that never saw the light of day other than in the cinema.
How do you deal with that?
It's a terrible thing, particularly when everybody's going one hit wonder for so long. The saviour was the internet, which comes later, and people then discover your legacy by accident a bit more.
Yeah.
But again, those songs are just unless you watch the movie. Fortunately, a lot of those movies, 80s stuff's very popular, and people go, "Wow, didn't know he sang that," or whatever. But of course, they're not hits because they've had their day. But it's an immense. It's a long story, it's life, adversity, tragedy. I found very often, maybe 10, 12 years later, you realize they were blessings. What could have happened if that would have done that? Actually, I wouldn't change it. Not now. It would have been nice, but what's happened in my life, I wouldn't change it.
I'm going to confess to you, I never thought I'd be sitting with the composer of that song, because I used to play it at full blast, roof down on my MG with blonde hair, would you imagine? I used to have hair like flying in the wind, listening to this go-to track of mine, which I think you're right. I think it's happened into, that struggle, but I'm going to do it. That determination, it's in the song, and the way it's built up, it's beautifully produced.
Well, you see, and it cost us the Oscar. We had an Oscar. I think we would have won that year. Yeah. I think we would have won. What the record label eventually said was, if you'd have kept your mouth shut and said it was written for the film, you would have got the nomination. But the fact that you said it was written about somebody else outside of the film, it negates you from the rule book. But I wouldn't change it again, because what we've achieved with the Man in Motion campaign far outweighs having a hit. I mean, it was a hit, but, people with that injury can walk again if they're lucky. We've helped build ICORD, which is the world's leading research facility for spinal research in Vancouver. And, people are walking out of there that would never have had a shot. A lot of it is timing with spinal injury, what happens in the moment. And all that's come greatly through the Rick Hansen campaign. And it just, kid with a dream from Worksop and a kid with a dream from Vancouver and, David Foster in the middle of it,
I know, it's fantastic. It's dynamite, that.
Yeah.
But I think your honesty and integrity has been a sort of a through line through all this. You've been true to yourself, and I think that's why you haven't done and said, the things that the record company wanted you to do, and that is a Maverick all day long.
Yeah, it was a tough one because record labels in those days, I was on the tail end of analog. Ahmed Erdogan owned the record label, and Neswi Erdogan. Ahmed signed me. Army privately told me that he saw me as their way forward. They'd just lost the Stones. They'd struggled, I think Zeppelin too. So they were looking for, and he said, "You're it, we'll do it." And I thought naively that my difference was my width. I was, I could be that or this. And of course, you learn later that they're looking for the sharpest point stick in the dartboard. And I blunted that by being me. But I thought that was my strength. Yeah. I wasn't just, a rock and roller. I was something else that wanted to make a difference as well.
Yeah.
Rock and roll can be quite limiting sometimes. Rock and roll can be just alchemy. Whereas, some of the great, it's a funny one, isn't it? Great songs, almost like classic great songs. They have something within them that goes far beyond.
There's purpose. Yeah.
They do, I was thinking the other day, people used to say, "Why film?" And I'd say, because it's the 360.
Yeah.
And then I thought, it's not true, John, because the true classic is the 360. It does it, doesn't it? Hard Habit to Break does that, those kind of songs,
If you were pinching yourself in the room with David Foster, you must have been pinching yourself when you're on tour and supporting and hanging out with the people you used to listen to in your bedroom.
Yeah, that was, Toto. That was the beginning, and I did Cry on the Carpet with that Toto 4 album. I remember, we're doing the sound check, and first thing they said was, "Make sure John's got enough time for the sound check." You'd never hear that. And then, "Hello, I'm David Page. I'm Steve Lukather." Yeah, I know you are, but there was that. And then I'd look over, and they'd be in the wings watching me, and "Why don't you come on the bus with us?" And I'd start travelling, and then Steve Picaro said, "I'd love to play on your records," and then come to my studio. So he'd play drums for me in his studio for free. And I'm thinking, just, and they were just lovely. And of course, as you know, the nearer the top you get, the sweeter they are, generally, by and large.
100%,
By and
100%.
large.
It's the ones in the middle you got to watch out for.
Yeah, and you can tell as well. I always kind of gravitate to the crews. I like the boys that do it and the girls that do it. And so a lot of my pals, even now, are from those days with the crews. And it's a bigger deal. It's a bigger deal on the back as it is on the front of the stage, isn't it? And greatly so,
A lot of ex-roadies, drum techs, are editors with us now because they know what graft is,
Exactly.
and they're highly creative.
Yeah.
And they've not got the CV, they've got touring dates, but they're my best workers,
Yeah.
and always have been, and now have gone on to do incredible things. I think we've been a home for that kind of thing. What were the other artists like Tina Turner and others?
Tina was a strange one. That I was in LA and the band couldn't, so the band were off. So it was just me. Phone rang, and it was Roger Davis, Tina's manager, lovely man. My manager was called John, so he thought he was talking to him, and he went, "Tina's just jumped up and down on the tour bus. She's just heard St. Elmo's, and she said I got to have him for the rest of the tour." And I went, "I think you need to speak to the other John." And so I met her that night. She was playing in Madison Square Garden, and we flew to New York. We met Tina, and we got on like a house on fire because she's, as you say, she's just a grafter. I mean, 6 months before Private Dancer, she was in the truck with the band, honouring the corporate gigs that she had to do before it all went nuts. She is the most dedicated artist I've ever met. In that the Private Dancer tour was 126 shows, I think, for a lady in her 50s. And the last night of the tour, a young black boy came up to me in LA and he went, "John, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Tina's son." He said, "This is the first time I've seen my mum in over a year." He said, "She won't see nobody from the family. Her energy is she does the show, she goes to the hotel, she comes back. So we've not seen her." That's the dedication of, and you see that's why this electric personality. I watched every show. I did 40. I'd do my opening and then I'd get changed and I'd go out and watch the master. So, education at the knee of one of the true greats, Never missed a beat, never gave you half measure. Incredible.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you write now, what do you reach for first? Melody, lyric, feel, and what rules do you always ignore?
Writing can come anywhere, usually not being anchored to an instrument. So it could be in the car. It's a word, it's a phrase, sometimes a melody. I do think they're gifted to you, so I take no response. Personally, I think they're gifts. Sometimes you're given a diamond, sometimes you're given a pebble. You work on them the same. So your job's the craftsman. That's my gig. But I honestly believe the good ones are given. And trust in it, like I trust in today. I chose not to know what you were going to ask or whatever, because I want that space between us to be filled by truth and whatever. And I think that's the big thing in writing. Even if you've got an ultimate, I can remember the first hit I had was a real, an engineering job. I knew that it had to be a certain type of track that had to do certain kinds of moves that when you heard it, it made you pull over and listen. So, and it did. So that song song called Naughty Naughty did the job of an album. It brought me to the attention of Mutt Lange and David Foster, all in one thing. But I knew that was my thing. But thereafter, so I knew St. Elmo's, obviously did an album. A lot of that was prepared. But you know that you're a new artist. 10 tracks have to be singles.
Yeah.
And Atlantic only ever released 1 or 2, even though you'd made 8. So that's the other tragedy, that I had an album that was 5 or 6 deep in singles, but they didn't do that. I didn't know. But so I'd always trying to never write a filler, always try to be thing. And that's why I love the movies, because if it was a good story, I saw myself as the 5th horse in the team, trying to tell that story in 4 minutes, what the message of the director. So that, and seeing it, I always hear it and see it in my mind before it's done. So I think that's it. But I think truth is the big one. Does it ring true? Is that the best word? Does that really do it? And it's torture, it is. You're given the gift, but it's your gig if it fails, it's down to you. I think that's what I would say.
Well, you did all right. You've written for films, commercials, other artists, as well as yourself. What's the biggest mental shift you make when you're writing to a picture or a brief instead of just writing about your own life?
Yeah, I think what we do in our lives, though, when you have a lot of, not just good stuff, when you have a lot of bad stuff in your life, it sits in a pot, and if you're smart, you can exercise that ghost and bring it. So I've found sometimes, even like also The Running Man, for instance, The Running Man. I remember going in the theatre with the producer, and I watched the film, and I heard the song straight away in my head. It was because it was such a great idea that it was a guy. Would you risk your life on a running man? Roll the dice on a one life. It was that, and and I thought, well, it's risk, innit?
Yeah.
Would you risk it? And I've been risking it all along. I'd always risked it, so I thought it was an easy. So I was aligning. I think the good ones. You bring a bit of you in,
Yeah, you
and
do.
it makes it true.
Yeah.
So, but that's the big shift with. I remember with these couple of short films I've just done, I didn't want to be the composer, writer, director, you name it. I think I want somebody else to come in and make it shine, and budgets do it. And then you think, okay, here I am, help me, and it comes, and it comes in. But they were the biggest shifts. The short film, writing the short film thing was a bigger shift than writing some of the big movie stuff. It's funny, isn't it, that. I'm always confident that, but the confidence comes not from me. That if I open my heart, it comes in, and it does. It does come in generally.
100%.
If I've been a good boy.
Oh, you'll have always been a good. Well, I don't know, but it's truth, isn't it?
Truth.
And it rings in as authentic truth when people listen to it and identify with it. You're not going through the motions, because the trouble is with writing to order is that you could go through the motions.
Totally.
It's the A to Z of writing for something, but you've got to give of yourself. You've got to give something that that you've stored up there, as you rightly say. You've worked alongside some huge names. What's the maverick thing you've seen another great artist do that's stuck with you?
I would say Mutt Lang. I was blessed to produce a record with Mutt. Very few people have. One of the greatest human beings I ever met. But a lot of the American producers take the money and run. So there'd be 3, 4, 5%. They get.
Back end.
Mutt will say, I want 5%, but I don't want any money. So he believes in what he does and doesn't take any money, but is on a bigger back end of it because he believes and he puts it all in. The other thing is, the knock at the door, man, we've got to have this. It's got to be, we're doing the release date on whatever. Mutt will go, it's done when it's done. And obviously I'm working with him at his peak. I don't know if he's always been able to do that, but the fact I've never heard anybody say that, because obviously you're dealing with the gods, and he would just go, it's done when it's done. And I remember on the Brian record, on the Everything I Do, the huge Bryan Adams record, Bob Clearmountain. I know a little bit of the inside story, but Bob normally would mix in a day. And I think on and off it was 10 days because Mutt kept going, no. It needs to be. And that's what I mean. How do you, even though you're Mutt Lang, how do you push the greatest mixer in the world? Keep pushing. No, no, no. And I do that. As I've got older, I've took my hand my foot off the pedal a bit more to be a bit kinder. Because people, when they work with me, have to take a deep breath because they know what's coming. But most people have worked with me half my life, but they know that it's going to be tough. It's going to be. I demand as much from them as me. I think, again, when I was in the room with Mutt, it was the first time in my life ever I didn't feel totally alone, that I thought, wow, it's exactly what I do. And maybe not to that level, but I'm jumping to that bar and trying to be better and better. When everybody in the room is going, I thought we had it, and you have to back yourself, don't you? We don't have it. And, a lot of people don't realise it's forever. What you do, certainly recording on film or whatever, it is forever. And, so, I'm making it for me, but I'm also thinking, what would he... And there's only a handful of them, but what would they think? What would they... And even your idols betray themselves, don't they? They always... And that's a saving grace for ourselves as well, that you realise you phoned that one in. They've all done it. Greatest actors, greatest composer. They've all done it. I try not to do that, but it does make me feel a little better that even the greats are fallible, you know.
I'm curious in the fact that in the same way AI is empowering, the internet has been a big deal for music. Do you feel slightly envious that you weren't born in the internet age, or do you feel that your journey is what it is and made you what you were anyway?
I feel really blessed that was my life. I'm 73. I feel that was a wonderful period of time to be. So I got the tail end of all the classic crooners and all the bit in the orchestras. Then you got the 60s boom, but then I got the 80s boom. I saw every technology come in and been part of that. The internet was this, and still is somewhat of a mystery to me, but I found it to be personally invaluable, both as a writer, you know, when you want to know what would happen in here, you can go to the internet and get it. But also from my career, I look at some of those songs that I think, man, this is the equal of anything I've done. And then you look and, you know, I don't know, 50, 60,000 people thought it was cool. It don't have to be a billion, you know. I'm not sure I believe all those numbers anyway, but I think it's another story. But, you know, the fact that even one-on-one, isn't it? You know, when that one person just goes, you could have been mixing sound, or you could have been singing on stage, or you could have been, and somebody just goes, it does touch you, doesn't it? It doesn't have to be 25,000 people.
Well, I was going to ask you, you've stood on stage with giants, Tina, the Beach Boys,
Yeah.
Toto Journey. What does it feel like in that split second when the intro starts and the crowd sings your song back at you?
Do you know, a lot of it is a blur, but I've always said, I mean, I had 20 years in the clubs. And Wales knows all about the clubs and knows how, because you had the greatest people in those clubs. So playing Madison Square Garden with people that know your songs is a doddle. Playing Stainforth Democratic Club where they'll throw a bottle if you don't do it. I've gone through that. I don't mean it in a blasé way, but playing to an audience that know, you know, if I had 10 hits, I wouldn't worry. I'm used to, you know, when I was touring with Tina, St. Elmos was the last song. So I had to survive her audience for 7 of my songs that most of them haven't heard. But I could resort to my stagecraft from boyhood and you know, cabaret, if you like. And I remember working with the Beach Boys and the guy said before we went, oh, this is a real first for us. And I went, what do you mean? He said, we never had an electric band open for us. I went, what do you mean? And he went, well, we used to have America, the group America open for us. And I'm thinking, we're going to go out there like balls to the wall with or whatever. And I'm saying to the boys, wear your brightest shirts, forget the leather, you know, let's just try and get it. And it went, but it went great, you know, and we got away with it. Like you say, because I think if you've had the experience, I'm not, on stage is the most comfortable place for me. And of course, what then follows this, what we're doing now. And you learn to be, if I look at interviews of me 30 years ago, I'm pretty wooden and fake. But now if I look, I think, yeah, well, I'm just not trying to, you know, be John. You know, it's like, he's all right. You know, it's like, and you can't be caught on a lie, can you? No. That's the thing, because if you tell the truth, you can't be challenged or whatever. No. So I think, you know, when you're young, I mean, I wasn't young, but I can remember I looked at a few things. I'd be in my 30s with Dick Clark, who's wonderful in America, and he'd be interviewing, and I'm thinking, I look a bit like a, you know, but you learn, and while you're willing to learn, it's a wonderful thing. Is like today, there's always one extra thing you think, I won't do that next time, or I'll, you know, and I think that's what keeps you young and keeps you going, doesn't it?
On it,
you know?
Yeah. I've got to ask you this because I'm curious. Are you worried about human creativity with AI coming in? Can AI be as maverick as a human?
I think I choose not to believe it it can take over. I think it is going to be infinite. I just choose to believe. I believe in the divine. You know, whether you believe it's the universe or God or whatever name you put on it, I believe in the divine. So, I mean, the divine must be within that somewhere. And who knows at what point the divine will be, you know, without sounding like you're on a pulpit. But I just believe that a human that's lived a life and grown and experienced many things in life, I just can't believe that can be, it's just regurgitated. We're all so different, aren't we? And I don't think that will be. I think it will wear many coats and but I just think there's nothing more powerful, is there, than truth spoke on honest lips, you know. I think it's, you know, and music done that way. And, you know, we're just the filter for it, aren't we? I find that with film, you know, that you know, when you're writing a script, you're looking at life, but you're translating it into word. But then you make the film, you're then translating that back into. And I just like to think that translation doesn't happen that many times. There aren't that many truly wonderful ones, are there?
No.
And while ever that's true, I'd like to see something copy that. I think it can make great country songs or make whatever, but can it make a classic? I'm yet to hear it. You know?
Well, I think it's going to make music more bland. It'll be this is how music works, but it won't have the originality of a lived experience that will identify with audiences. That's why I think the authenticity, the originality is not going to be
I
there. 'Cause
think.
it's copied from other experiences.
I think so.
From the outside, the world of fame looks perfect. You've lived the other half too, haven't you? The dips, the politics, the times when the phone is quiet. What have the lows in the business taught you about yourself that the highs never could?
Just as I'd reached the top of the mountain, I was fighting a record label that didn't want me to be on that course in Hollywood. At the peak of that, somebody I loved and trusted within my organisation betrayed me. And I gave them a second chance and they betrayed me again. And it resulted in a court case for 20 years that stopped me being able to work for 20 years. My income stopped, everything, the drawbridge came down. So for 20 years, I couldn't work. So I did anything and everything to make a living. And my friend had a wood shop. And I would go in there French polishing in his wood shop. And I'd go fit in with him and all that. But I'd be in the wood shop and St. Elmo's would come on the radio. And then everybody in the wood shop would look around at me. So that's a pretty big gulf. And I would have thought, good on you, boy. You're one of us, you know, yeah. But there's a great line in, I forget the Tom Cruise film. And the old agent says, you know, I love my life, I love my wife, and that's my kind of success. It's a pretty hard act to follow. And I would couch that by saying the failure of what looked like abject failure of 20 years enabled me to be a father to my children for 20 years. So I raised my kids from boy to manhood in those 20 years. And most of my contemporaries are on their fourth wife, estranged from their kids, whatever. So this is what I'm saying about success and failure. It's a funny thing, isn't it, how that was a blessing, but I didn't realize it was a blessing. And it was an intolerable time and very, very, it cost me my health, certainly cost me a colon. It cost me a colon. Cost my wife what's that one in the neck? Cost my wife that. Sure, stress is 20 years of it, you can imagine when everything's threatened, you've got no money. But we came out the other side and life is sweet and, and a great source of creativity.
I see in you, that's an incredible story, the wood shop. I had no idea. And I would have loved to have a film camera at that moment. But you know what? We've got imagination. I played it in my head. I can just see it. It's hard, isn't it, when the people you trust hurt you?
Yes.
And how you recover from that is something I've struggled with over the years. And well done you for doing so.
And yet, still never put my armour on. I could put my armour on. Most people put their armour on. And, certainly successful people are surrounded with armour or courtiers. I never put my armour on. So I'm as vulnerable to attack as I have ever been. But that enables me to have the creative because it comes in. So I wouldn't let the callous of the injury stop the truth coming in and the love coming in. So that's a big part of me,
Yeah, I've had to learn to be a statesman in being a CEO, but being a creative as well. I'm in tune with life as a child. I reimagine things, I ask questions, and you're vulnerable. You are. You don't want to put your guard up because that closes the drawbridge, as you say, to creativity. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to be that person. I'm not that person. But I do have to have a word with myself often when I react to something as the creative, more emotional me, and say, well, filter it through CEO me, not the songwriter, not the filmmaker or whatever.
And the wife's word in your ear as well.
Oh, very much the wife's word, yeah. The wisdom.
Yes.
But what stopped you from walking away? You could have said, that's me, done.
Well, it's like you said, when they tell you no, it's got to be yes. So I really thought, I honestly thought, so bear in mind this was 1991, the drawbridge came down, and it wasn't lifted till 2010. So instantly, it was a weird thing. When I was in America in '85, I've always been passionate about the military. I've always been passionate about what it takes for a boy or girl to kind of do that. When you could be clubbing and all the things and you choose to go. And in '85, we'd come out of the Falklands, and I think my experience, '83, '84, I was making my way in America. And there's a lot of expats talking about how we were saber rattlers and whatever. But I was thinking of all those young boys and girls that whatever. And I thought I really would love to do something in my own little way to bring a light to the reason why. Why do they do that, whatever? And of course, within the midst of it all, I wasn't able to. So in 2010, I went to America. I wrote an album called The Mission, which was all about the military. And I gave all the money from so I got some payoff with so me and my buddy, we did 35,000 miles in the first 7 weeks of 2011, doing radio shows, TV shows all over America. 6 states in one day, sometimes, for love, not for fee. Promoting the idea of the sacrifice of, putting your life on the altar of freedom, and it's always intrigued me. Military is not a very fashionable thing, but that dedication is massive. I mean, that is a religious thing for your fellow man, isn't it? Whatever you believe in. So that was a big thing for me, but it didn't happen. I thought, it was a little voice. I was out of step. By that time, in America, in '83, '84, the Americans military were told not to wear the uniforms in the street because they get spat on. The America of 2010, it was on every beer can, flags flying and everything. So I was so out of step, it didn't happen. And so it was, it was wonderful, but it was a very little pebble in the water of change, if you like.
You've developed a real connection with Wales and Welsh stories. What is it about our place and our people that has gone under your skin?
We came down to the Carmarthen Bay Film Festival about 3 years ago now. Had a film in it. We got in the final, but we didn't win. And we were driving home. And I said to my friend Gary and the boys, there's something, a magic here. I can't put my finger on it. And everybody in the car agreed. We were kind of like-minded souls. And I came home. I was angry. Right. And I thought, I'm going to write something. I'm going to show off. Simon ran the festival. I thought, I'm going to send him tonight. I'm going to finish this, show him I can do this. And I'd always been interested in war poetry. It really touched me, but they were all English. They were all, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen. I'd got this idea for a story, but it needed a war poet. I thought, a Welsh one. So I looked and I found Hedwyn, but I think Hedwyn found me. And it did me in, absolutely did me in completely. So the incredible thing to me, it's unfolding on a Saturday as I'm trying to write it. I just couldn't believe it unfolding. He was a very gifted poet. Llanhanath is a way of writing poetry completely unique in the world because it's got an internal rhyme within the Welsh language that is unique. So it's not only have you got to rhyme, but you've got to make the meter of it. But he was very passionate, very much, I think, very much a maverick. And his brother, he was a conscientious objector. I don't think officially that, but he was a pacifist and didn't want to go to war. And they were rounding up the families from the farming villages, and his young brother was going to go. And Hedwyn said, I will go in his stead to fight in France. So he went, and he left the notebook with his poetry in it. So while he was in Belgium, Passchendaele, he wrote the poem that won him the Eisteddfod from memory. 500 pages, I think. It was a huge thing. But the romance of it is that when you are entered in the Eisteddfod as a poet, you can't use your name. So they don't know, there's no favoritism. And his pseudonym was Fleur de Lis, which is quite poignant when you think of what if you do research, that's poignant in itself. Fleur de Lis. So that the Eisteddfod in Birkenhead, and the Druid said, and the winner is Fleur de Lis. Silence. the winner is Fleur-de-Lis, silence. And then somebody stood up and said Fleur-de-Lis fell 2 weeks ago in Passchendaele. And the chair that you get when you win the Eisteddfod is a remarkable thing. And it's been known as the black chair. If anybody gets the chance to see the black chair, I love woodwork and I do understand what it takes, but there is carving on the black chair that if you do research, most scholars of that kind of work say it's physically impossible to carve without the wood splintering, and yet it's done. So it was carved with such passion by a carpenter that was working 20 miles from where he fell on the battlefield. So there's all this romance and incredible legend. I think Headwind deserves to be correctly translated. And, so he can stand alongside his colleagues in the rest of the world. But Headwind and many others are trapped within a language that, if they can be sympathetically restored, they can touch people long after their moment. So I think that's something I'd like to see happen. It's ironic, isn't it, that Dylan Thomas didn't speak or write in Welsh? Everybody knows. Would that have been the same if he would have been locked in the language? I don't know, So that's the thing for me with Headwind.
I think it's a remarkable story. When I was told that the composer, singer of St Elmo's Fire is working on a film on Headwind, I said, no, this is crazy. It's incongruous. But it's Maverick. I mean,
Yeah.
it's exactly what you shouldn't do, but you do, because your gut tells you there's something here, and you're alive to those influences, alive to those little signs that says there's something here, which I greatly admire you for.
I knew the tragedy of the mines in Wales. I knew the tragedy of Aberfan. Simultaneously, I'd been fascinated by the Welsh choirs and what it was that elevated them beyond other choirs. But there was something in the Welsh choir that dropped people to their knees. My conclusion was it was the isolation, the nature, the tragedy, the abuse that it's had. So that's what I'm on the quest of now, writing this new story, which on the face of it is just the story, like a full Monty, of a Welsh male voice choir. And I think the more we've come and the more we've spoken risky conversations where you open your heart and you risk being looked at sideways. Sometimes the shutters have gone down and sometimes they haven't. And we're not so different, are we? I think South Yorkshire and South Wales were built up by the mining industry and the industries that go. And it just leaves you with, they've kicked your legs from under you, and people muck in, don't they? And the military humour is not that dissimilar to community humour. Just even the blackest of moments, it's a saviour. And I think it's very alive and kicking in Wales. And I think the fact that it's still somewhat isolated, particularly away from the big cities. And I remember driving down, we were going to do a little premiere of A Pack of Five in the Ascun, in Headwind's birthplace. So we opened the visitors centre for free. 65 people came in, all Welsh, with this English interloper, thinking, oh yeah, who's this coming? We read some of the poetry of Headwind, and then we showed the film. Something very strange happened. There's a scene in the film where the soldier gives Headwind's notebook to the sergeant. And as we did it, the sun blasted through the window in the Ascun and it lit all the room. It was on the day of his death. It was an anniversary of his death, and it freaked everybody out in the room. I missed it. I was that busy, engrossed. And then somebody questioned me and said, what do you think about what just happened? And then the whole room said, yeah, the whole room lit for 5 minutes in brilliant light at this point. And in life, as a maverick, you go on a risk and you're looking for a sign, am I on the right path? And I've had so many signs in my life, and a lot of them happened in the last 3 years in Wales. Very abstract things that you'd think million to one, I'll give you one example. So I'd never been to an Eisteddfod, and Elsa Davis, Headwind's niece, took me to the Eisteddfod. And as an Englishman, the Eisteddfod is quite a strange experience with the robes. But once you realise what it's built upon, it's sacred. But we went in a room, 1,500 people, and we sat down. And the lady next to Elsa, her great-grandfather, saw Hedwyn fall on the battlefield and trained with him before he went off to France. I mean, what is the odds on that? That kind of thing has happened throughout. Signs that make me think I am on the right road, and it's very small. It's the other thing, I love it. The other thing about Wales, it's quite globally small. I think it lends itself to, those little secrets that become big. I think there's an opportunity for something small to become very big. And I think the fertile hearts and minds of Wales is the place for that to grow from, even though I realise how protectionist. You learn that to your cost as an Englishman, that it is you wonder why the shutters go down, and it's because I understand, it's protection and it's self-survival as well. And, it's been used so many times. People have been dealt false promises, haven't they, and whatever. And I get it. And I'm not selling that false promise,
I think we've adopted you as a Welsh son by now. So I want to look forward for a minute, the next few years. What excites you most? Is it music, film, or something completely different again?
Film for me, some great stories to tell. And I keep thinking do I have the stamina to direct it? I know I can do it. I know I can bring the best out of people. But I think with certain stories that I've written, I do think I've got to carry it all the way through just to make sure, particularly in the sacred ones. This is a sacred one. The one we're doing now, Pack of Five, was sacred. Blessed by the fact that everybody was Welsh and most of them knew about it, so they realised that it was a big deal. But this new one it's sacred. But sometimes people I think that with writers, a lot of the male writers write women's stories better than women do. And I feel that sometimes, that maybe being outside of it, I can see the woods for the tree. You often, when it's close, you just take it for granted.
Yeah.
And so, so for me, I think film. But then again, you get that great soundtrack and it just, you switch the sound off and it's a great film, but then you put that soundtrack in, if it's great, and he's done it, or she's done it, man, oh man, it's a biblical experience, isn't it?
I agree. Well, you did that for us with St Elmo's Fire in Venice. I sat in that cinema. I never forget it. Are there stories or causes you still feel you haven't done justice to yet? You've raised 400 million with the whole spinal charity. You're about more than songs and writing films.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly all driven by the need to do good. It sounds corny, but unless it's got some other life within it, I can't do it. It has to have some, it's going to make a change. It's going to make a difference, And what's that word? Edutainment,
If I said the next John Parr anthem, what would you want that to be about now at this stage of your life? What's the next anthem?
I think it might be about something that was never discussed, certainly in my thinking, was the mental side of it. I think coming from where I come from, it's pull yourself together, lad, and whatever. And, have you talked to somebody? But I realise that, there is a real issue with the mental thing in ordinary life, not just if you've got a diagnosed. I found myself, in the midst of it as a younger man, being overwhelmed, and certainly as an older man, being overwhelmed by just the tidal wave of things, plates you're trying to juggle, emotional things you're trying to juggle. So I think I'd like to see if I could touch on that side of it. I've got an idea for something that I'm writing at the moment, and it's I think something that's very deep hurt in my recent life. I think I'm best placed to be able to write about it. It's very private, personal, but the hardest thing for me to go through. And I think I'm well placed, but also I'm able to shift and think I can tell this story from a side I've never seen it taught from. But it's so important that it might open the eyes of the sufferer to the healer, and so I think that, and if I can wrap a song within it in a phrase that, those phrases that in life, sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can surface. But then I heard somebody who didn't speak English very well do it beautifully, and they talked about the tide needs to go fully out before it can come back. But what I wanted to explore was also, but what if the tide doesn't come back? But you have the faith to believe it will. So it's all.
Wow.
So I think that's where I'm at in my mind at the moment, because I think it's a huge issue for people, and I think it's going to get physically worse because a lot of our heroes have betrayed themselves.
Mm.
And if you were raising a child, who would be the role model that you would direct them to? And so somewhere along the way, I think there's that. And then the other would be the message of peace, which is the biggest challenge to mankind, I think. And that is, from Adam and Eve, we've never solved it, have we? You know, that's what I'm currently searching for. And it's in Wales. That's part of my mission. Part of this year, we'll see what I'm trying to explore. And I want to talk to people that dream this dream of it, the possibility. But how? And how do you sow that seed in an innocent mind that it becomes a doctrine that's not a pulpit one, or not a you shall or whatever? And that's what fascinates me moment. Can that be found? And who am I to find it? But I'm looking.
I think this generation certainly are tired of war and tired of, you know, the adversity. I think there is a glimmer of hope, I think. But we'll see. You know, I wish you well with it. I look forward to it. I'm going to go on to Maverick Maxims, one of my favourite bits of the show. It's quick fire questions. Just answer with whatever comes to your head. This is how we roll.
Okay.
A song by someone else you wish you'd written.
The Long and Winding Road.
Yeah.
Or Nimrod.
That's a good one. One of your songs you'd happily play for the rest of your life.
Running the Endless Mile.
Right, I'll have to check that one out properly. I'll play it in the car later.
Because I am.
What's one habit or ritual that keeps your creative muscle in shape?
Not wearing deaf aids. As soon as I hear it, or see it or hear it, I can't help it. It goes in and instantly becomes, that could be a song, that could be a poem, that could be whatever. So yeah, that would be the one, you know, if you could switch that off, because it's like, it still is a million miles an hour. Yeah. There's not enough time to do it all.
I relate to that. My head is like a bunch of ferrets having a fight in it. You know, it's like 24/7.
Totally.
And I can't find the off switch. Tell me about one bit of music business wisdom you'd tell a young artist to completely ignore.
Oh boy, to completely ignore. I think listen to you. I think there are no rules. Break them at your peril. But I think be you, because I could have listened to people and, you know, gone completely down. I think, you know, I'm not saying I'm right and you're all wrong, but if you listen to somebody's idea, I'd very much want to know what they were capable of before I listen to it. See, anybody's got an opinion, but I'd very much like to see, is it in line with my own, you know? Yeah. You know, so that, you know, I think be true to yourself.
What is the non-music, non-filmmaking thing that gives you the most joy right now?
My grandson. I think my grandson. And I think I look at YouTube a lot, looking for it, whatever it is. And I find myself with this face. And even people I've admired, when I've watched the thing, my face is this way. And I find if I watch something with animals or something with joy, my face has done that involuntarily. So whatever that is, it's certainly nothing to do with fast cars, beautiful women, or whatever. It's to do with something within that natural purity, within, I think, nature. I think, again, going back to Headwind, I remember driving down to do that, what worried me greatly. I'm going to talk to Welsh people about Headwind. They'd had these insular lives within this small village and where was that wisdom gained from? And as I drove down through Wales, I thought, it's Wales, it's the beauty, it's the nature. They've raised sheep, they've seen the life and death, they've seen the cycle. And when I got down, I didn't realise Elsa began by reading some of Edwin's nature poems. Headwind wrote a poem in English. Nobody knows. I didn't know. So Elsa dropped it on me that evening of the anniversary of his death. The last poem Headwind wrote was in English. After the Eisteddfod one, he'd written this thing. And it was a commission for a wedding. And the father had said, would you write a poem for... And you know what the surname of the daughter was? Parr.
That's uncanny. Signs aligning.
I've thrown you now. Go on.
I know from personal experience that the music industry can be brutal. Looking back, what's a mistake or a tough moment that hurt you at the time, but gave you a lesson you still lean on now going forward? We all get told what we should do: play it safe, don't upset people, don't mix genres. Can you think of a time you ignored very sensitive advice and you're glad you did?
Yeah, it was a double-edged sword, really. It was Atlantic Records, the big bosses. The conversation was, you've got to make records like this. And the other one, in the same sentence, next sentence was, and you've got to get rid of your manager. And if you don't get rid of your manager, your career with this record label will be over. I didn't do either, and both cost me tremendously. But I didn't do either of those. But in retrospect, I got 20 years to be a dad, but that's what cost it me. My career, it cost me my career and my trust. But it enabled me to be the greatest thing of all, isn't it? What's better than that, than to be, the guiding light for that period of their life,
We have a feature on the show called The Maverick Moment. It's about a point when you look around and think, no one else could have done this exactly the way I've just done it. What was that Maverick moment for you?
It was St. Elmos. I know that David Foster would have just got somebody to sing Song 9. But moreover, a young boy born and lived 6,000 miles away from me went through this journey very disparate to mine, but yet it was the same one. So I was the best placed person to do that, to sing it, to write in that moment. It's terrible to keep going back to that one, but and being so long ago. But I think it's vindicated, isn't it, now? But I think that would be, I was placed, And I think David says that too now, as we've got older, and, they think. A lot of my, what can you say, lords and ladies of the time that maybe left me behind have suddenly realised now that's the friend I should have kept throughout. And that's quite rewarding also.
Yeah.
That people, in the end realise what's really important,
And if you had to name your best decision and your worst decision, what would they be?
My best decision was marrying my wife. My worst decision, that is hard. Well, certainly one of them creatively would be Bette Midler. With Atlantic, they said, would you like to produce Bette Midler? She, to me, was a person that worked with Barry Manilow. She was a Vegas artist. I'd got no concept of the depth of the woman, of the human being, and the talent. And I said no. And I think what I would have learned and that experience of being in a place with her as a person but also creative, what we could have brought, I think there would have been a meeting of minds there. And again, it's those in your naivety, you just go, and when you're in the midstream of it all, you're the hottest thing for that week. Everything was coming at me, and I just declined.
There'll be people listening who grew up on your songs and others in completely different fields who recognise the pattern: working class, big innings, a big break, and then the long game of staying true to yourself. What's the one thing you'd want them to take from your journey?
To take from it? He never gave in. He never gave in and, kept the faith, really. I think keeping on, that another thing in the military at its highest echelon. The thing that sets the military from the 1% of the SF, is they just don't understand giving in. It's impossible, isn't it? For you too. It's impossible. It's not even
It's not an option.
Well, for one night or 2 nights, but yeah, I've had those thoughts recently, but they fade very quickly.
Yeah. We always finish with this: complete the sentence for me. A maverick is someone who
prepares to go where others dare not. I'll go against all odds. I think it's right. If I think it's right, that's me, I'll go there. So a maverick is someone that's prepared to go what do you say, the path least trod.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's me.
And finally, years from now, when people hear St Elmo's or they stumble on one of your films, what do you hope your story stands for?
I hope that it gives them the impetus to put one step in front of the other, to have hope. I found in life the biggest thing in life is hopeless is a word, an empty word, but hopeless is the darkest place in the world. So it sounds corny, but if it just gives one little tiny pinhole of hope, I think that I'll settle for that.
Yeah, it does give hope, and certainly St Elmo's for me is my go-to track, and I can't believe you're sitting there. Thank you, John. I mean, so grateful for coming in. From, a kid with tunes in his head to the man behind one of the greatest anthems of the 80s, and a creator still pushing, into new work and new cultures. You're not settling for anything. Your journey, without a doubt, is a proper Maverick one. Thank you so much, John. Yeah, nice one,
Cheers,
pal.
man.
And to everyone listening, remember, the world doesn't change by playing it safe. Stay sharp, stay bold, and keep that Maverick mindset alive. We'll see you next time on Inside the Maverick Mind.